Therefore, I believe in white supremacy.
Today, our country has lost a true American original, my friend and mentor, Robert C. Byrd. Senator Byrd was a man of surpassing eloquence and nobility.
There are white niggers. I've seen a lot of white niggers in my time. I'm going to use that word.
I admired his tireless advocacy for his West Virginia constituents, his fierce defense of the Constitution and the traditions of the Senate, and his passion for a government that improves the lives of the people it serves. As Secretary of State, I continued to rely on his advice and counsel. Robert C. Byrd led by the power of his example, and he made all of us who had the honor of serving as his colleagues better public servants and better citizens. It is almost impossible to imagine the United States Senate without Robert Byrd. He was not just its longest serving member, he was its heart, its soul, and its historian. From my first day in the Senate, I sought out his guidance, and he was always generous with his time. Robert C. Byrd left such a legacy.
The same Confederate flag Bree Newsom took down from above the South Carolina State House represents the exact same slave-owning and traitorous Confederacy for which Bill Clinton signed a resolution stating that the highest star on the Arkansas flag represented. To this day, they still have an official Confederate Flag Day. And not only did Bill and Hillary never say anything about this, but for 12 years, they celebrated the Confederacy too.
Clinton cited an Associated Press article that discussed, in her words, quote, how Senator Obama's support among hard-working Americans, white Americans, is weakening again, and how whites in both states who had not completed college were supporting me. There's a pattern emerging here.
Senator Obama's support among hard-working Americans, white Americans, is weakening again.
Hard-working white Americans. I mean, Hillary Clinton flat out said it.
Her electability argument boils down, in effect, to working-class white Americans are not ready to vote for a black American president.
Yeah, it was fairly shocking. I suppose at this rate, by the time we get to Kentucky, it'll be segregation now, segregation forever.
There are people who are on the streets and involved in this movement who were there in '96 when the Welfare Reform Act was passed. They were there in 1994 when the Violent Crime Act was passed. They have a sense of how Clinton had a part in proliferating and spreading a lot of the problems that we're talking about now.
It's a very well thought out crime bill that is both smart and tough. And we will eventually get a good crime bill like the president has proposed. It'll just take a little longer than it should have.
In addition to what we saw, which is her speaking the talking points of the prison guards lobby, we also saw her come out to invoke the idea of super predators to push for these crime bills.
They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy.
It was never used to describe anyone white. It was always used to describe young black men as a mass.
We cannot keep imprisoning more people than anybody else in the world.
Does no one else see the hypocrisy? Forget about super predators in the 1994 crime bill. When Hillary Clinton said this, she was actively using lobbyists from two major private prison companies to raise campaign cash. And she only stopped taking money from associates of the GEO Group and Corrections Corporations of America after Black Lives Matter and other activists confronted her. But even now, she has campaign staffers that lobby directly for GEO Group on her payroll.
So I think we've got we've got somebody saying here, we have to bring them
apologize for mass incarceration.
Okay, we'll talk
I'm
about
not a super predator, Hillary Clinton.
Okay, fine. Yeah, you want to hear the facts, you just want to talk. You know what? Nobody's ever asked me before. You're the first person to ask me, and I'm happy to address it, but you are the first person to ask me here. Okay. Back to the issues. Yes. My first job was with the Children's Defense Fund.
Well, you know, Hillary Clinton's an old friend, but they're not friends in politics. We profoundly disagreed with the forms of the welfare reform bill.
By the time Bill and I left the White House, welfare rolls had dropped 60%.
You know, many years after that, when many people are pronouncing welfare reform a great success, you know, we've got growing child poverty. The poor are suffering.
Protesters filled the streets of Chicago today, rejecting Mayor Rahm Emanuel's apology for the fatal police shooting of 17-year-old Laquan McDonald.
This video and that death of Laquan McDonald happened before the election. What he did was cover up that information to conveniently be elected for mayor.
I don't understand, looking at the evidence that we now know is public, how any person, particularly a presidential candidate, could stand behind someone like Rahm Emanuel.
Hillary decided to profile Hispanics as drug dealers. Specifically, Arkansas troopers were to stop and search cars driven by Hispanics. Clinton's criminal apprehension program was ruled unconstitutional. Clinton's Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994, that legislation led to the mass incarceration of black Americans. Legal scholar Michelle Alexander notes, Bill Clinton presided over the largest increase in federal and state prison inmates of any president in American history. Alexander accused the Clintons of decimating black America and said Hillary does not deserve the black vote.
Okay, we know Black Lives Matter. We need to keep saying it so that people accept it. We have to demonstrate a sustained commitment to building opportunity, creating prosperity, and righting wrongs. Not just every 2 or 4 years, not just when the cameras are on and people are watching, but every single day.
It was appalling to hear Donald Trump describe immigrants as drug dealers, rapists, and criminals.
Latinos were similarly slandered and profiled. Hillary decided to profile Hispanics as drug dealers. Specifically, Arkansas troopers were to stop and search cars driven by Hispanics.
It was appalling to hear Donald Trump describe immigrants as drug dealers, rapists, and criminals. It's shameful. Mexico is such an important problem. Mexican government's policies are pushing migration north. There isn't any sensible approach except to do what we need to do simultaneously. Secure our borders with technology, personnel, physical barriers if necessary in some places, and we need to have tougher employer sanctions, and we need to try to incentivize Mexico to do more. If they've committed transgressions of whatever kind, they should be obviously deported.
I believe in white supremacy.